Hello everyone, this is Brian and welcome back to Twilight Struggle, Play the Experts, the game where I play the experts and you teach me how to clean up my audio. Last episode, we got a game going against an extremely high-rated opponent. We did a kind of non-standard de-Stalinization headline, which repressed his attempt to steal all the points from the Middle East. We then managed, through a series of carefully calculated maneuvers, managed to take over a lot of Europe and dominate that pretty firmly. We're in pretty good shape in the Middle East, and we managed to beat the Americans into Southern Africa and, of course, the infamous South America. Now that puts us in a bad place in one area of the map, and that would be Asia. We are a bit behind the curve in Asia, and Asia hasn't scored yet. So we are going to be seeing what we can do about the Asia situation this turn. So let us look at our turn 3 hand. Our turn 3 is the turn when the reshuffle occurs. Every game of Twilight Struggle will involve the deck reshuffling at the beginning of turn 3, and that means that any cards that we already played that weren't removed from the game could be back now. But more importantly, it means several other things. It means that we actually know some of the cards in his hand. So he has got Asian scoring, he has got NATO, he's got Eastern European unrest, and he has gotten socialist government. And the reason we know he has those is because those are the 4 cards we have never seen yet and that did not appear in our hand this time. Likewise, he knows some of the cards we have. The cards he knows we have aren't quite as important as the ones we know he has. But we do know that he's got some decent ops over there. I mean, socialist governments he might send to space, or he might simply resolve the event and then put the influence back. That's not a great card for him, but it's not a terrible card for him, given that he holds it and given his the countries he has in Europe, such that they are reasonably well controlled. So he's got a decent hand over there, and he's very happy to see Asian scoring, because if I had Asian scoring and the 5-year plan, he would know I could do, through a little bit of trickery, make it so that Asia didn't score this turn. Now, the other thing we know on turn 3 is that anything that goes into the discard pile from now on is not going to be coming back until at least turn 7. So this would be the time that we can now, for example, the Defectors card, we're going to be using it for something. We could space it, but we might also simply play it and give him a point. But in any event, he's not going to be using Defectors against us until at least turn 7, and that is a good piece of news. And since he had to use Decolonization, our favorite remaining card in the deck, before turn 3, that means it will at some point reappear and we might get it. Yeah, he could get it and space it again, but in any event, it's still in the card mix, and that's what we like to see. So let's look at our hand here in more detail. First of all, we've got Red Scare Purge, and that is a fantastic headline, particularly when we know that he cannot defector it. So that will decrease the value of all of his cards by 1 for the rest of the turn. Can't go below 1, of course, but in any event, it's going to really make his life miserable. And that is pretty much what our headline is going to be. I do want to point out to you one other unusual headlining tactic that we could have engaged in. And I'll explain why, it's not the best thing to do for us now, but it's almost a good thing to do, and in some game situations it might make sense. And that is, what some people forget is that you can actually headline nuclear test ban. And headlining nuclear test ban as the Soviets, well, first of all, it would give me like 1 point, so mostly big whoop, but it would also lower the DEF CON to 5 during headline phase, and then it would be my turn, and that would mean I could suddenly take a turn when the DEFCON is 5. Now, the reason that would be important is if I wanted to do something terrible and devastating in Europe, and I'm actually almost set up for that. If you look at, I could realign Italy at +2. I mean, he would probably, if I hauled off with my, I don't know, Red Scare Purge card, for example, and just started doing realignments, he probably wouldn't have anything in Italy left after a roll or two, and then I could move on to West Germany at +1. So, that's kind of cool. And say the map looked just like this, except that I controlled West Germany, and so all he had was Italy, and he'd be sitting there like trying to come in, and I could coup him out or something. And if I could put him up against the wall where he's one card away from me scoring European control and instantly winning the game. Because if I control Europe, if I control all the battleground countries in Europe, and he doesn't somehow have as many countries as me of the non-battlegrounds, then that's an instant win of the game as soon as the European scoring card comes up. So if I could put him all the way up against the wall for threat of his life, then that would be a good thing. So it's just good to know about that exists, but it's not worth doing. That's just not my number one way to go here. I think it's much better to go with purging all his cards and using our ops to spread ourselves. We've got a lot of spreading to do around the world, really. And we'd like to just take a big banging coup against something. We'll discuss that in a second. So that's the other weird little headlining thing we could do. Now, looking at the rest of our hand, we've talked about defectors. Defectors optionally goes to space, or optionally we use it for 2 ops. Nuclear test ban's gonna be ops. U.S. Japan, now he's not in Japan yet, and since it's turn 3, we can actually dispose of that using UN intervention and, just kind of leave Japan as an open question. Now, if for some reason, if I had like this hand except turn Olympic Games into the Asian scoring card, then what I would be trying to do is use 5-year plan to, play through all my other cards, and then at the very end of the turn, play 5-year plan to delete Asian scoring card from my hand. Or if he somehow didn't headline Asia scoring for some insane reason, play it right away, and I somehow had 1 more point in Japan, then I might use the Japan card and the UN intervention to actually take over Japan and nullify his ownership of Asia. But that opportunity just isn't quite, I don't think, going to happen for me. So we're just going to have to eat Asian scoring, and then it's not going to come back around till turn 7. But that's my general plan for the hand. The question with 5-year plan is going to be, do I actually hold on to that, hoping that a bad scoring card will come up that I can then dispose of with a 5-year plan? The problem is that, the one bad scoring card, you're looking at the map right now, is Asia, and he's got it right now, and he's going to score it. So what else is going to come up in the next few turns? Well, maybe not so much. So we'll see about him. We may end up using him or getting rid of him or something. All right. So our headline is clearly going to be Red Scare Purge. His headline is shock of shocks. He'd like to go ahead and take his points for Asia, and he knows I can't do anything about that in headline. So he's done it, and now he's ahead again in the scoreboard, and that's just too bad. So that brings us to coup. Now let us discuss Panama versus Libya. Those are the 2 most obviously coup targets. And the thing is, Libya is almost exciting, except that I'm basically gonna dominate the Middle East. It would be sad if he immediately fires off the Middle East scoring card before he dominate, but I think if he had it, he probably would have headlined that, pop it out of his hand. I think the fact that he headlined Asia probably means he doesn't have another round of Middle East scoring card yet, and that means if you look at the map, you can see I'm pretty much gonna dominate the Middle East, unless something really surprising happens. So therefore, I feel like going to Panama, which would give me a domination, is better than Libya, which would merely increase an existing domination. So that's what I'm going to do. And for anyone who's relatively new to Twilight Struggle, the thing for domination is you first of all got to have more battleground countries. Those are the important countries that are highlighted in red. Those are the ones that the DEFCON degrades when you have a coup in them. And you've also got to have more total countries. So even if he ties you in non-battlegrounds, then you don't dominate. And you've got to have at least one non-battleground. So if we look at Central America, then right now, well, I have more countries than him, and I have at least one non-battleground, but I don't have more battleground countries. But if I took over Panama, then I would suddenly definitely have more battleground countries than him, even if he took Mexico, which he can because he's adjacent to it, and therefore I would suddenly dominate. In the Middle East, well, I'm tied with him on country, so I need one more country. I do have a non-battleground country, and I'm tied with him on battleground country, so adding one more battleground will make me dominate, and there's lots of places since I'm touching Iraq, and I'm in Iraq, and I'm touching Saudi Arabia. I'm even touching Israel, so I've got a lot of opportunities there. So I think it is going to be a coup in Panama, and that went very well. So we have taken over Panama. He has redrawn Romanian abdication. So see, now the point of his little sneaky end of turn play into the Saharan states becomes clear, if it wasn't already clear, which is that he is now in Nigeria, which helps him in his general quest to deny me domination of Africa eventually. So that's a good thing for him. See, if I couped Saharan states, then that would have left the DEFCON at 3, because Saharan state is not a battleground country. So I could have smushed him really firmly there, but then the DEFCON would still be 3, and he would be able to coup me, and so he would go probably light Zaire on fire, or almost even worse, Argentina, although he wouldn't have quite as sure of succeeding there. So that's why I just didn't have time to deal with that at the same time, and that's of course why it was a good move for him to sneak in at the very end of the turn and create that little threat that I didn't have time to deal with in Saharan states. So we do get our 3 in Romania, and meanwhile, let us go about some of our business. And I want to pollute Israel here, because that makes it so he can't grab it all with just a 4 card, which makes him have to, if he goes into Israel now, he's going to have to show his interest. He's going to have to communicate to me his interest in Israel before he can just take it over and I'll have a chance to resist. And it gives me the option to, of course, grab the rest of Israel later. And the funny thing is that, the Americans going into Israel have the risk of the Arab-Israeli war if they don't have enough little side friends. But if the Soviets just grab Israel, well, then it's theirs forever because there aren't any take Israel away from the Soviets cards. All right, so he is spacing socialist governments. He's in, so now he could get 2 space things a turn. I am less interested in denying that than in shoring up my South America position. So I'm going 2 into Chile because that now makes it so that he cannot completely remove me from South America with a Voice of America card if it comes up later. So now my key homework in South America is done. He's going to play Cambridge 5, which pretty much is going to show us that he doesn't have any more scoring cards. That's the right way to play Cambridge 5 as US, which is to say use it after you've used all the scoring cards in your hand up so that the event does nothing. And he is continuing to lock down Asia while we sit helplessly looking at him. Now, I don't like giving my opponent even 1 point at this stage of the game, and I could space defectors, but on the other hand, I really want to make progress in the Middle East, and I feel like there's actually more points ultimately for there. So I am just going to go ahead and give him a point and take 2 influence in the Middle East here. So he is playing into Mexico. Now, some might wonder, why is a good player playing into Mexico when that actually opens it up for me to coup him in Mexico, and theoretically I could gain control of Central America, which is worth a lot of points. And I think the reason I do it when I play in there is because of the Junta card, which if I drew the Junta card and I could just pop 2 points right into Mexico from orbit, then I could do a coup and then, wherever I want, possibly Mexico. And even if the coup doesn't succeed, then I can just play some in on my first action round. So I could just suddenly have an insuperable control of Central America without him being able to do anything about it. And so putting something in Mexico, actually, even though there's risks, there's also rewards for it. And I, as an American player, you really don't want to see a Soviet-controlled Central America. It's got 2 touchers on your superpower. You don't want me, touching you in both places at the same time when Central America scores. That's why a Soviet-controlled or even dominated Central America can actually be a pretty high score because of those touchers. All right, so we are going to use the UN intervention card to get U.S.-Japan out of our hand and go ahead and get ahead of him in the Africa race. So now we've got more battlegrounds than him, and we'll dominate as soon as we get a non-battleground. He is getting a coup in, which gradually creates a threat in, if he coups also the other one next to Cuba, then he could start realigning me out of Cuba. It also gets his military ops up. So see, he played a 3 card, used it for a coup. Now it got a -1 happen because of the Red Scare Purge. But he managed to do a coup because I was in a non-battleground. And so he gets his 2 military ops from that, which is going to save him 2 points. Basically, anytime you don't have at least as many military ops as the DEFCON at the end of the turn, then you lose that many points to the opponent. So he avoids that and does a reasonable thing at the cost of, he loses his 2 guys in France, but mostly a big deal. So now we're going to play 5-year plan, which is it's a U.S. event, and sometimes there's a risk from the event, but we don't have any other cards, so we're not going to lose any other cards. We didn't have a card we wanted to hold. We've already used UN intervention to played an extra card because we use UN intervention. So there's nothing going to happen with the event. Perfectly safe to play it. And we are just going to continue our project of filling up the Middle East for hopefully a good solid score later. And his final move is to go ahead and use his big old NATO card. And he just wants to be ready in Asia and Southeast Asia. Those are going to be some painful scoring when they come up. Now, Asia won't be for a while, but Southeast Asia could be any time. So, DEFCON goes to 3, and we go to headline phase. So, let's look at our first hand of the mid-war. So the mid-war cards are in, and there are new terrible things we have to look out for. We have got a rather low ops hand here, so it's funny, the ops gods are fickle, right? We had a good hand last turn, bad hand before that, and it's not quite terrible because we do have 2 3 cards, and they're both playable 3 cards. They're not his terrible events. We have the Allende card, which is often really good, except now in this case we're actually already firmly in Chile, so he's not helping us there. Normally I would have de-Stalinized over to Venezuela so that Allende could let me into Chile later, but because I was de-Stalinizing at DEFCON 5 at the time, I had to go to a place that had stability 3, and that's how we end up in this situation. South African unrest, normally an awesome card in this case, maybe not going to do much for us because we happen to already be in the places that it helps. Lone Gunman, a card I would much rather him have drawn because that is, like the CIA, it creates the DEFCON suicide threat for him if it appears in his hand. So I'm probably going to just play that for one op at some point just to shuffle it back in, and hopefully he'll get it in the late war. One small step. We're actually looking at one of the best times to use one small step, which is when... So one small step lets us, because we're behind in the space race, it lets us jump 2 spaces to the next space. And the space we jump for would actually give us 2 victory points. And more important, it would keep him, who's currently ahead of us in the space race, from getting those 2 victory points. So in other words, it's actually a 4 victory point swing if we execute it now before he has a chance to space something. And it has the incidental quality of stopping him from spacing 2 cards a turn, which is a more minor thing, but hey, why not? It carries the slight risk that it does put us a little more ahead on the space race, and we could get in a situation where we accidentally get too far down. We get to box 4 before we really want to, and start getting stuck with cards like Grain Sales and Voice of America and stuff. Now, we have disposed of the CIA, so if something terrible happens with Grain Sales, well, we at least have hopefully a place we can kind of hold that one card for a while and not get utterly killed by it. So I'm actually thinking of headlining one small step here. I think a 4 victory point swing is a good victory point swing. Oh, and there's the Grain Sales. Okay, well, at least we won't be getting it ourselves. Oh, look at that. Now, that's actually pretty funny. Grain Sales lets him steal one of our cards from our hand, and then he can play it or return it. And, of course, he'd love to steal a card that we wanted to, he'd love to have stolen, I don't know, SALT negotiations or nuclear subs from us and be able to put them into effect and do that and coup it all turn. And if he steals the card, he can use it to do things. But the funny thing is with Lone Gunman, well, he doesn't really want to play Lone Gunman and give us a thing. He wants to steal the coup from us. So I guess I understand why he's returning it to me and going ahead and he's using his 2 points. So yeah, he's making a move for Africa. Okay, that's fair. That's pretty good. I get my auto success, so I get the 2 points for the space race, and we're in the slightly scarier third box. But hey, he did space. I didn't know he was going to, but he did play, didn't space. He played Grain Sales, so that was my most feared 2-point card is at least done with, without doing a lot of damage and wrecking our hand. Not that this hand's already kind of a wreck. So that means DEFCON is 2, so we do not have the quote-unquote obligation and opportunity to take a coup to get, while the DEFCON is at 3. He stole that from us, but that does put us up to bat with a free round. All right, so I was thinking that arms race, if I had gotten a coup and gotten ahead of him in military ops, I could have used arms race to get 3 points, and I might well have done that even though it's my highest op card this turn. And of course he has actually just created domination of Africa because he now has 3 battlegrounds to my 2 and he has a non-battleground. So I'm thinking of using arms race. So he might have the Africa scoring card, and I want to stop him from doing that. And he's vulnerable to a coup to me in the Saharan states because that's not a battleground country. So if I get in there, that takes away his non-battleground country, so he doesn't dominate, and it creates a realignment threat to Algeria by surrounding him in Algeria, so that if he doesn't do something, then I could actually get him out of Algeria. So that creating a threat and stopping his threat at the same time seems like a good thing to do. So let's do that. All right, here comes the Bear Trap. He is playing it for influence, which is it's a normal way for the American players to do it. The good players often will play Bear Trap not for the event. So if he plays it for the event, then I would have to sit and discard cards from my hand until I rolled at least a 1 through a 4, anything but a 5 or a 6. And that could be useful to him in making me skip at least one round, maybe two. It's useful to him. Well, first of all, it's useful to him if I'm unlucky. But it's even more useful to him if he headlines it in order to steal the action round one coup and a battleground opportunity. Now, as it turns out, he had a better card to do that with, which is grain sales. Grain sales let him do that and steal a card from my hand, and it's just and doesn't let me discard one of my bad U.S. events. So it's actually better for him to do it with grain sales, and given that, Bear Trap with 3 ops is better than Bear Trap and have me probably just get rid of... He skips his turn and loses 3 ops to do that, and then I get to get rid of whatever I think is the worst card in my hand, of his events, which is probably our man in Tehran at this point. Maybe it's nuclear subs, but it's one of those. And so he was right to use the 3 ops, and what he's done is, first of all, moved into Tunisia, which both shores up Algeria from realignment attempts, because if I go into a realignment attempt in a country like Algeria, what we would do is add up how many adjacent countries controlled I have, which would be France and Saharan states, which is 2, and then add up how many adjacent countries or the country itself that he controls. So that would be now Algeria and Tunisia, which is also 2. So we'd be each roll a die at even odds, and then whoever got more, if I got more than him, then he would lose. He would lose guys in Algeria. I don't have anybody in Algeria. I have no skin in the game, as it were. So it would be a free roll for me. But he has both lowered my roll to even from what it was +1 just a second ago if he hadn't gone into Tunisia. And by being in Tunisia, he now is adjacent even if I knock him out. See, before I was both at +1, and if I was successful, he would be completely gone and have no way back in. And so then I would just roll on into Algeria for nothing, and that would be bad for him and very good for us. So that's a very strong move, and Tunisia is a stability 2 country, so I could coup it, but I'm less likely to get in there for sure, especially with these, tiny little cards I have to coup with. And even if I got in, see, I'm now surrounded there by Libya and Algeria, so he could immediately realign me all the way back out, and, we'd just return to... So anyway, it would be a less exciting thing. Now, he's also put 1 to over-control Nigeria, so that I can't just use a 3 card to pay the iron price, as it were, and take it over. Because when he controls a country, anybody who controls a country means the opponent to place influence has to pay 2 influence to get 1 in as long as the country is controlled. If he only had 1 there, then I would pay 2 influence to break his control, because then we'd be 1 and 1, and then I could use normal 1 for 1 after that to use the 3rd point on, say, SALT negotiations to end up going to control of the country. Because he's over-controlled it, well, I can't really do that. And so, great solid move by the opponent. So I'm going to go ahead and score Central America now, which is the other main responsibility I have this turn. And I want to do it before he has time to do terrible things in Nicaragua, which he could coup, creating a huge realignment threat to Cuba. So I'm going to go ahead and get that scored, take the points for it. He has the Middle East scoring card, so he's clearing his responsibility. He admitted that he didn't really have much he could do about me dominating it. And so good for him scoring it off before I eventually get around to putting 1 point in Egypt. And now I probably won't bother to put a point into Egypt because we know that the Sadat card is coming. So let's get this lone gunman shuffle back in, do something with it. There's not a lot that's very attractive. We're just going to keep filling up South America to hope for a good score one of these days. He's taking a coup in... All right, so he's going to go ahead and crush Cuba. Well, he gets good rolls on his Central American coups there. Look at he's at 5 in both. If he had gone to say 1 or 2, I'd probably coup back, and we'd just go back and forth, and and eventually the turn would be over. But as it is, when he's at 5, And so, see, he's got 2 countries next to Cuba, and his superpower, the dark side of touching his superpower is his superpower sometimes gets to touch me. And so he would actually realign Cuba at +2. And so the Fidel Castro regime is probably starting to rethink the whole Marxism-Leninism situation. And I think, Fidel's going to be instituting some free elections and stuff pretty soon. So too bad for you, Fidel. I just don't see a lot that I can safely do about Cuba. It just doesn't seem worth kind of cooing against the wind there. So I'm just going to try to realign him out of here, just try to get lucky with my 1 point, but no. Here's what realignment's going to look like when it's done successfully, and oh wow, we survived 1, and he's reconsidering, and Fidel has totally embraced capitalism. All right, so good for him. We do get our 1 point for the U2 incident. That's sort of like his version of playing the defectors card to give a point, so that's been returned. And I'm actually going to use South Africa as the event because it lets me get 3 total influence instead of 2 total influence down in Africa. And I was torn here because on the one hand, I could put 2 into Botswana and that would make him not presently dominate. But I think if he dominated Africa right now, he would already have played the Africa card. And I want to get a point into Angola before he can do that 3-point take it over thing to me. So I'll go ahead and get 1 point into Botswana, which hopefully will eventually be my bulwark against him having more countries than me. But we're just going to have to, colonial rearguards. 4 points, all bleeding over Africa. Well, I guess it could have been worse since I got that extra point that I just milked out of the South African card just came in handy because it's interesting. I think if I had been him playing that card, I would have probably just taken over. I would have still have put the point into Angola to kind of reactivate the threat of the 3-point takeover. But I think I would have put a point in each of the little 1 countries over in the eastern side of Africa, or there's many of them. Wow, they're everywhere. I probably wouldn't have risked putting 1 into Cameroon, but I would have put 1 into all these other ones, except for maybe Southeast African states, just because of the looming Portuguese Empire card. Later, and so that would have given him a lot more countries than me and lots of places to hold out, make it really hard for me to ever potentially dominate Africa, because I don't really know why he wants 1 point in South Africa while I already still going to control it. I don't see why he's going to make a move there. I don't see why he put 1 into Botswana. It's odd. It strikes me as odd. Maybe he didn't see that I had South Africa over controlled and he was just playing quick. I don't know. It just seems like he had a slightly better use for it. Because I feel like I'm getting off light with colonial rearguards coming out and all that happened is that. I mean, yeah, maybe he places a point in the Philippines. I would have probably just saved that for later and used card that grants you access places or lets you break controls of things. You want to use it for that, not just to kind of do things that you could already do with an op. Because it's not like I'm even touching the Philippines, and he has 1 million guys in Asia anyway. I don't know. I don't really approve of his play. Now, I'm not sure I approve of the play I'm making here. I can't quite bring myself to play Our Man for Tehran for the event because there's some really good scoring cards coming up in the mid-war, and I just don't want him to be able to discard them. I don't want to. It would just be crushing to me to see Europe and or South America scoring cards go away. So I really want to hold on to Our Man in Tehran for at least a little while longer. Nuclear subs, I could activate it as my very last card instead of my second to last card. He did already kind of get a coup. It's not like he needs a coup for military ops. And I know he's probably going to coup one of my African countries anyway when I do this. Is he going to coup both of them? Well, maybe. So we'll see. I mean, I'm being a little greedy by doing this 2 rounds instead of 1 round. It's because I want to hold open the idea of if he plays something really good, I could use the salt negotiations to get a card back. But what's he got? Okay, Ussuri River skirmish for the coup. All right. So he didn't go to Africa. He went to South America. All right, fair enough. It was a little riskier on whether the coup was going to succeed or not, but he did kind of poke his way into my area, and now I am not by any means guaranteed domination of South America. Okay, good move, but fair enough. All right, so I'm thinking that what I'm going to do is play the salt negotiations and bring Red Scare back from the discard pile so that I can do it to him again. Tamping down his ops is good for me to do. And by reducing DEFCON to 4, I'm opening up the possibility of a whole bunch of coups next time. And no matter what he does, even if he takes another coup, it gives me a chance to maybe take a coup in Asia, somewhere like Pakistan or Thailand. And that might be good for me depending on what cards we draw. And if it's DEFCON 5, then sure, I would definitely like to do it. So, I'm going to create a little bit of chaos here to try to distract him from some of his scoring opportunities. All right, and he is using the Brezhnev Doctrine, so that's the corollary of the containment. That's the one that would have increased all my cards for the rest of the turn. But he's going ahead and getting it out of the way to just play some influence. And I guess he's shoring up West Germany against realignments in the future. And he's doing his little sneak through a battleground at the end and definitely seriously threatening to go into Brazil if I do the things I'm likely to do with a coup in a battleground. All right, so that brings us to the end of turn 4. We are actually in great shape on the scoring board now because we managed to score 2 good dominations, and he didn't. So that's good. So let's see what happens in turn 5. It goes to DEFCON 5. That's exciting. And I would like you, this is an interesting and complex hand we've received, so I don't want to go too much into it yet. I want you to tell me what are some of the things we could do with this hand and how would you play it? This is a really interesting hand for making a plan because there's some different opportunities. And so I want to hear from you folks what you would do with this hand. What would you headline, of course? What would your plan be for the rest of the turn? And, for extra credit, what would some of the other possible plans be and why did you reject those possible plans? Because this is a rich, interesting turn of cards. So you think about that, tell me in comments the answers to the homework, and we will see you next time on Twilight Struggle, Play the Experts.